Hello, this is David Taylor Klaus, and welcome to Mindset Mondays with DTK. This is episode 55 in what was originally a year-long series of Facebook Live broadcasts, which is now an ongoing series of indeterminate length. So just the playground, why are we here? So here's what we're up to, right? Mindset Mondays is an opportunity for folks with a growth mindset or those who'd like to develop one to play with new ideas, new concepts, and try on new ideas, right? And today's playground, as people start to join in, challenges are what make life interesting. Overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. Huh. There's a guy named Joshua J. Marine, whose quote we're playing with today. And, it takes me back to a movie that sort of became if it were an album, we would have played the grooves out of it. We watched this movie so many times. This was A League of Their Own. Geena Davis and, among others, Tom Hanks. And there's a scene in the movie where Geena Davis is, after a couple of years of playing in the Women's Professional Baseball League during World War II, she was ready to bail out. And as she left, Tom Hanks challenged her and she said she's leaving because it got too hard. And Tom Hanks' line is awesome. He said, "It's the hard that makes it good." And I took a lot out of this, and so have the kids. It's an interesting way to play with ideas. Again, Marine's quote, "Challenges are what make life interesting. Overcoming them is what makes them meaningful." The idea of reframing challenges and the difficulties and looking at them as learning opportunities. During a leadership program I did back in 2009, 2010, one of the women in our group, Wendy, looked up at one point, I think during the end of the first week-long retreat, and she said, "I'd like just one day without another effing learning opportunity." It was kind of exhausting, the fire hose of epiphanies. And I got that because at that point it was exhausting. By the end of this 10-month program, Wendy looked up and she said, "I hope I never go another day without another effing learning opportunity." And I appreciate that too. The idea that there is always something to learn and we have a choice, right? I can look at a challenge as, yet another. Or have the opportunity to frame that as, ooh, what's the cool opportunity for learning here? And I have so many of those in my world where I can choose to look at it as the challenge. And I can find what's interesting about it, or I can step beyond that and look for what is the meaning here? What is the opportunity in the overcoming of this to bring some meaning to my world? We have three, this is, not news to folk. Elaine and I have three very complex kids. First of all 5 of us are ADD, and then several of us in the house have lots of other, let's just say, neuroatypical things going on in our neurochemical soup. And my God, Elaine has taken what we've learned in parenting these children and with some research and a lot of digging and a lot of work, in addition, has turned it into a company serving parents, providing coaching, training, and support to parents in over 130 countries, helping parents help kids. We've taken those 3 complex kids, and with her partner Diane, they have created an international business changing parenting. That's what ImpactADHD.com does. Right? So it's not just overcoming the challenge of raising these phenomenal children. overcoming the challenges, the unexpected, turning that into something meaningful, shifting not just our experience, but changing the world. And for me, it was a lot about not just getting a better understanding of my neurochemical soup and not just learning to live with my wiring. It was also taking on self-compassion. What made the overcoming, and which is an ongoing process, meaningful is taking on the self-compassion, giving myself a break and not judging myself against a metric that's unreachable. And so not only is it learning to live with the ADHD and manage it, it's actually learning to harness it and own it. That's been the meaningful part of the journey. And look, I live with a woman whose superpower is not taking things personally. Okay, it's rubbing off a little bit, but that's a journey for me, is getting out of the mode, the knee-jerk defensive mode, and taking things personally and leaning into the 4 agreements, which I keep on my desk to this day. Leaning into the 4 agreements and working at not taking things personally, not making assumptions, being impeccable with my word, and always doing my best, leaning into those. That has been an incredibly meaningful journey, shifting the way I relate to people. And that piece about being vulnerable, about being human, one of the coaches I've worked with, Laurie Schneider, used to tell me, I cannot tell you in how many coaching sessions he'd say to me, oh, those wacky humans, reminding me that what I was complaining about and what was going on in my world was just me being human, and leaning into owning my faults, my humanity, my imperfections. My eldest child, Bex, talks about being perfectly imperfect, stepping into owning that. Damn, that's a lifetime journey to overcome. And how meaningful has that become? And as I'm rattling on here, please share the kind of things that you are overcoming and where the meaning is in your world. In a company I co-founded with a partner back in 1995, I ran the books for the first year or two, for the first 2 years. And the only reason we had a third year is because Beth took over the books. It was not, let's just say it was not my zone of genius. It was not the ideal place for me to putting my attention. I was not managing my ADD. I was not, let's just leave it as I was not managing the ADD. So I was not the ideal person to be running the books. Part of what I learned to do over those first 15 years in business was to stay in my zone of genius, connecting with the people and the content and creating the strategy and doing the high level work, the enrolling the client and seeing what's possible and creating the path to achieving that possibility. That was my zone of genius. It was not the practical and tactical and step by step. So staying in my zone of genius and hiring folk to handle the stuff that I sucked at and I wasn't enjoying, I hated doing, doing that for which I was uniquely suited, and only that. Being able to acknowledge that the Superman cape didn't fit anymore and I didn't have to do it all myself. That was a huge overcome for me. And what we were able to achieve in that company when I let go of the Superman fascination was amazing. Been running for almost 15 years when I sold to Beth, and 20 odd years later, still out there. And there's that spiritual challenge for me. As an entrepreneur, it's very easy to fall into that scarcity mentality. Not enough time, not enough people, not enough money, not enough revenue, not enough, not enough, not enough. And part of my spiritual work was leaning into that grace, that sufficiency, that possibility, and overcoming the knee-jerk reaction to catastrophize forward, to see only the negative or what could blow up, and put all this energy into trying to shift things over which I had no control, and not paying attention to the things that I could control or I could impact. That was a big spiritual piece for me. And that overcoming, that finding grace, finding the easefulness, the ease and the flow, that has been a hugely meaningful shift for me. It allows me to see the possibility and see the longer arc, not just the short term, quarter by quarter fascination with shift rather than the longer shift. So I realized that as I look at this quote, there's so many things in my world where the meaning that I find in life has come from reframing the challenges and overcoming towards something meaningful. Hey, Mary Virginia, I do see the request. No, I didn't go over the 4 agreements. I'll put a link to the book and also post some of the information about it in the thread, because the 4 agreements provides a tremendous amount of that grace and ease and flow. So yes, I'll post that for you. And yeah, Irene, thank you. How wonderful it is being perfectly imperfect. Just this incredible miracle of being human. Everything that we are comes from our humanity. The brilliance, the magnificence, the flaws, the imperfections. And when we look beyond those imperfections and lean into just our raging, flaming humanity, wow, how much easier is the world when we lean into what is real and what is true instead of trying to create something that isn't there or live a life that isn't ours. Mary Virginia, I love that comment. It's so simple and so true. Community is where it's at, is leaning into one of the things that came up for me in thinking about this broadcast for today was that idea of just asking for help and leaning into the help, asking for and accepting. I still have this vestigial belief, even after all this work, that, as I talked about in a previous episode, I've made up that if it's hard, it must be good. And if it's easy, it's not as good. There's less value. And though overcoming can be what leads to something meaningful, but it doesn't have to be an overcome. It could be a path of ease and flow. And either way, leaning into community. We are wired genetically for community. When we look at asking for help and leaning into help and getting the support, and we look at that and reframe that as being connected and being part of community, the energy that one gets from contributing time, effort, energy, support to another, there's a net energetic gain of being of service. Brilliant studies out there that actually look at that. So yes, of course, accepting help from someone else is as much a gift to them as their help is a gift to you. I do love this piece, that the overcoming those challenges is what makes life meaningful. Maybe that's why these Tough Mudder and Spartan races and all these obstacle course runs have become so popular. It's not just the run It's overcoming and mastering the obstacles along the way. And the photos of me and Josh and Josh's friend Sad just covered in mud at the end. Okay, those are great as well. The overcome is enticing. And yet I think it's important to be careful and not live your life seeking things to overcome just for the sake of overcoming. You know, the verse about not laying obstacles in front of the blind. Can't remember the actual word. It'll come back later. And I think it's important not to lay challenges in front of us just for the sake of challenge, just for the sake of overcome, just for the sake of being able to battle through it. And Ellie, thanks for putting that there. I recently saw the movie Castaway for the first time. Powerful lessons in resilience, yes. Try and try again, the need for connection, even when you have to create it. Yes, creating connection. But I think it's important not to be creating obstacles and challenges just for the sake of the challenge. I do that or have done that much more. And I think it's an artificial. And not to minimize what you're saying, Ali, because yes, even when you have to create connection, and Tom Hanks in that movie creating Wilson, that volleyball, so that he had something, someone to communicate with. He built himself a community. How magnificent. And he had enough obstacle. He had enough challenge. He didn't have to create any of that. So I think bottom line for today is playing with this idea of challenges are what make life interesting. That's one reframe all by itself. Picking another way to look at the challenge. It's not, oh my goodness, what am I going to do to overcome this? Look at these challenges. That first reframe is, ooh, how interesting, right? And then there's the next reframe, that on the other side of that challenge, on the other side of the overcome, on the other side of slaying that dragon, there is meaning. There is outcome that has longevity and impact in a positive feed. So this is sort of this is a double reframe, right? When facing the challenge, the first opportunity is, ooh, interesting. And the next one is, ooh, on the other side of this, more juice, more energy, more meaning. When we have motivation, and we can attach motivation to something that's hard, we have the tendency to lean into that activity more. So reframe your challenges as something interesting and something that serves, and use that motivation to plow through. Yeah. Mary Virginia, finding the silver light to point towards that North Star during the hardest times is important. Yes, sometimes I feel so buried. Yes, that's the other piece is, oh my goodness, looking at the array of challenges facing us. One of the things I love about Impact ADHD's model is first step, take aim, pick one thing and focus all of your attention on that. Focusing your attention on all 12 things staring at you is overwhelming. Back to the quote from MASH television show, Charles Emerson Winchester, when asked why he was so good, he said, I do one thing, I do it very well, and then I move on. So what I offer you for this week is look at the challenges that are facing you and take that moment to reframe. Look for what's interesting in this. Look for the meaning that's on the other side. And even if it's not clear yet, trust yourself that there's meaning on the other side of the overcome. So I think the question for you is, with the challenges that are facing you, the challenges that you're facing, what meaning is waiting for you? So between now and next week, What mindset will you choose?